Hi, hello everybody. My name is Ricardo Mendoza. I'm here with Ruben Puentes. We're going to demo our extra credit project for uh, our CSE, what is it, 5720? 5720. So what we have here is a menu here where we can select the different tables. So I can view the data that is in each one of the tables in our database. And in each one of our tables, we'll see a title of the table. We'll see the first row, which is usually going to be the foreign key, and then we'll see all the data. And within inside the grid itself, we can make updates to the data. So I can enter this Wiley test. I can make an edit to this, click update, and it's updated in the database. See Wiley test. I can remove that update, and I can make a new one. And I can create the record and it'll show up, and I'll show you that on the database. Here is our new row, and then I will delete that new row. So now I'm going to change to a table that deals with different types, and one table that deals with different types is titles, because I want to show that we're going to use different types of inputs based on the actual data type in the database. So I'm actually looking at the metadata of the columns in the database to determine its type, whether it's a number or if it's a date, so I can give the user an appropriate kind of input. So one of the other things I did is I'm actually feeding back any errors that we receive from the server. So I'm going to make a new record, and I'm going to make the publish ID something absurdly large that I know for a fact there's no matching foreign key. And this one's not a big deal. And I'll select date, and I'll say it's paperback, and it's over $9,000. Is that 9,000 or 90,000? Okay, 9,000. And when I click create, I'm actually going to get back the error that the database is going to give me. So now I know what's wrong here. If I really wanted to, I can add a validation layer, but for this project, we just simply are going to show the errors that we got back from the table. Then, okay, I know my mistake. I'm going to pick a value that I know exists. And say paperback. And it's also over 9,000. And we can see that new title is here. I can also show you the data inside here. There's a new title. But this is not a good record. It's just a test record, so I'm going to delete it. What we did here, we just used Bootstrap. This is a Bootstrap navigation. This is our drop down here. And the name of the table, and again, the table here. So what we're going to show you next is Ruben is going to show you the code inside the Python project. So before I flip over, I'm actually going to give a little bit of a preview. What we have basically is our Flask application that handles all the requests that we receive. And we have a different function for every one of the tables that's bound to a different route. And then once a request is received, it feeds the data into this index file to display it on the screen. So Ruben is going to go over the publishers function. And then after that, I'm going to go over the index file. So Ruben, if you could talk to us about how this function works once you're ready.
Okay, so with the publisher functions, we first make the table name variable equal to publishers, and then we make the save area equal to none. What that does, it basically empties any errors that we had from previous requests. And with the request method equal to post, basically will once the table is loaded up, it will, and you have your mouse hovering over the button, it will know it's in post. And when at the match request.form, with the action parameter, it tells us which button the user clicked. And depending on which button the user clicked, it will go into two different cases. In the case that a create button was clicked, the SQL command will run. And with the empty parameters right there, those parameters will be, in this case, pname, email, and phone, and set into the parameters, parameter. And same thing in the case of update, just the parameters change. In this case, it's pname, email, phone, and publisher ID. And then again, same case in the delete, the SQL command changes and the parameter change. And then at the end, we save result here, and then this sends the query and parameters to the database. And then finally, we do save error, which saves any errors to display in the index file. And Ricardo's going to talk about the index file.
Cool. Yeah, after it does all that, it actually gets new data. So you could see after it received this post request, whether or not it was a post or not, it's going to get fresh data and it'll pass that into the index file, which I'm going to explain next. So what we did here is we used Python with Flask, and so that's what you saw earlier was the Flask app, and the Flask app serves the index file using a notation called Jinja, which is something I just learned. And what it allows us to do is type our plain Jane HTML, but also mix in data from the Flask app. And so this section here, this is just the navigation. We don't need to talk too much about that. But right here is a section. So you can see right here, this is kind of like an if statement within inside of our HTML. And basically, if a save error was passed into the index file, we'll actually see that there. And I demonstrated that when I insert a value that did not have a matching foreign key. Right here, this is just the label of the accordion, says the name of the table. And basically what I'm doing is with our MySQL Connect class that we are using to query, we're getting back information about the columns. We're getting back the data, and we're also getting information about the columns, such as like the column name. And so right here, it's a very simple. This is what a for loop looks like in Jinja, and we're just looping through the fields, and that's how we're displaying these things here. This is just a for loop inside the HTML. And then for the data, we're doing a nested for loop. We first need to loop through each one of these rows, and then within each one of these rows, we're looping through each one of the columns to display the values. And inside here, I'm doing a couple things. So the first thing is we don't want to give the user an input if it's a primary key that's not readable. I mean that we shouldn't allow them to change. So if in here the column name matches the primary key that we're passing in here, we're not displaying an input. Instead, we're just displaying a column and we have a hidden input, so that way we get that value back. Otherwise, we have an input that's usable and we're actually feeding the type of that input, so that way if it's a uh, date input, or if it's a number input, or if it's a string input, it'll display the right kind of input. And those values are coming from this information right here, whether it's a varchar, integer, or a date. So that gets transposed with some of the code in the SQL connector. Um, and we just display the form control. And at the end of every row, actually every row, first of all, is a form itself. So every row has the capacity to submit a post to that app.py file. And it really just depends on which button the user clicks. So if they click this one, it specifies the value is update. If they click this one, it says the action value is delete. If they click this one, it says the action value is create. And that's how in that Python file we showed earlier, we were able to determine whether they were trying to create a record, update a record, or delete a record. And so after that, what we have is a section to create new rows, to new records, to create new records. And we're doing basically the same thing. We're looping through the fields. So there's at least one input, at least one for the row, and I'm giving it a placeholder of the column name so people know what they're typing into. and I'm also specifying the type down here, and that's how you work get this calendar control here and this number control here. And they can click there to submit. Let's see here. I think that kind of covers the HTML file. Ruben did a good job of explaining this. The one thing too is that all of these methods are very much the same. We wrote one, and then for the rest of them, we copied and we just changed out the table name and the property names. So it's very consistent. Whether it's subjects, whether it's titles, it all follows the same pattern where it's either creating, updating, deleting, and then displaying the information. And really, that kind of covers it. Do you have anything else to add, Ruben?
No, I think you did it well.
Cool, great. All right, well, thank you. Hopefully, we get a good grade, Dr. Chan. All right, and that's all we have for you today. Have a great night.